Hi, I'm Elizabeth Hendrickson. I work with software development leaders and teams. Today, I wanted to talk about Pivotal, the company. The company was acquired by VMware in 2019, and VMware was acquired by Broadcom in 2023. So while the products live on, Pivotal, as I knew it, doesn't exist anymore. But I was there off and on for over 15 years. So the company means a lot to me and had a huge impact on who I am today. Hang on, wait. I don't actually want to talk about Pivotal. Well, not exactly. What I really want to talk about is the right way to build software. Or more specifically, that there is no one right way to build software. That seems so obvious when I say it. And yet, the ideological process debates persist. Scrum, safe is unsafe, less. Pick your favorite flavor of a methodology, and there is somebody who is arguing for it and somebody who is arguing against it. And sometimes those debates can get kind of, well, nasty. Now, Pivotal was known for its strong opinions on software development. So strong that some even referred to it as a cult. And so it might seem strange that I am saying there's no one way to build software, but it turns out Pivotal is a great case study in process variation. In order to explain, I do need to take you through a little bit of Pivotal history. If you've ever heard of Pivotal before, you probably encountered it because of one of three things: Pivotal Labs, Pivotal Tracker, or Pivotal Cloud Foundry. And you might not have the full picture. Now, Pivotal Labs was a consulting company founded in 1989 by Rob Mee and Sherry Erskine. It was originally named Pivotal Computer Systems, and it received a whole lot of attention starting in the early aughts, thanks to a proven model that, despite the high cost of labor in the San Francisco Bay Area, made it cost-effective and competitive to onshore rather than offshore software development. And they achieved this with a laser-focused execution model that was based on a strongly opinionated flavor of extreme programming, plus Ruby on Rails. They also had a history of open sourcing really useful things like Jasmine, the JavaScript testing framework. The company only had maybe 200-ish employees across a handful of offices before they were acquired by EMC in 2012. It was a small company, but had a huge industry impact. Pivotal Tracker is a project management tool that Pivotal created initially to track client projects, but eventually they offered it commercially as a standalone SaaS product. I've met people who only knew of Pivotal through Tracker. They had no idea that Tracker was just a tiny part of the business. And finally, Pivotal, the enterprise software company that made Pivotal Cloud Foundry, among other things, was spun out by EMC. Remember, EMC acquired Pivotal Labs in 2012? Spun out by EMC and VMware in 2013. As the name implies, that spin out did include Pivotal Labs, but it was way more than that. It was a huge company at birth, over 1,200 employees with a healthy book of revenue thanks to mature products like Greenplum and Gemfire that were included in the spin out. Cloud Foundry was also included, but it was nascent at that point. However, by 2014, that was the flagship product, and Pivotal was known for Pivotal Cloud Foundry, our distribution of that open source platform. Now, I was involved in all of those Pivotals in one capacity or another. In 2004, I joined my first Pivotal Labs client project, as an outside contractor. Over the next 8 years, I went on to join several others, but always as an outsider. In 2005, I paired on writing the first lines of code for the thing that eventually became Pivotal Tracker. And then in 2010, I did some outside testing before they opened it up for credit card subscription payments. In 2012, I joined Pivotal full-time to work on Cloud Foundry. Later, I went to work on our data suite of products, which included Greenplum and Gemfire. And I ended up becoming the VP of R&D for the data suite and ended up on the executive team. That means I got to cross off a bucket list item I didn't even know I had when I stood on the platform at the New York Stock Exchange in 2018 when CEO Rob Mee rang the bell for our IPO. But I digress. Anyway, I was still there at the end of 2019 when the VMware acquisition closed. And that means I got to see Pivotal through all its ages in locations around the world and across all of our products. And yes, Pivotal had opinions on software development. We had such strong opinions that we made Pivotal Tracker as an embodiment of our project management philosophy. Stories lived in one of 4 columns: done, current, backlog, or icebox. Everything is visible on one pane. The life cycle of a feature includes an acceptance stage, so tested is part of done. There are only 3 kinds of stories: features, bugs, and chores and bugs don't get points. Well, we did eventually make that last thing configurable, but even today, that option is marked as experimental with a warning, strongly discouraged. We had such strong opinions that we stood up a whole new open source foundation, the Cloud Foundry Foundation, so we could specify pairing and a co-located dojo training model for onboarding new contributors as part of the open source governance model. Not only that, but Cloud Foundry itself embodied our developer experience ideal. A deploy should be as simple as running the command cf push and easy to automate. And provisioning a data service should be as simple as cf create service. In short, everything about the way we worked was designed to reduce friction, increase flow, and support focus. Distractions are the mind killer. Naturally, and thanks to our messaging and positioning, people internally and externally talked about the pivotal way. As the pivotal messaging said, we were transforming the way the world built software. So you might think that as someone with that much history with Pivotal, who was so steeped in the pivotal way, that I think I know the right way to build software. But here's the thing most people don't know. Even some people who worked at Pivotal don't realize that there was never a single pivotal way. Not only did every part of the company do things a little differently, but even different offices did things a little differently. Let's take some examples. Pivotal Cloud Foundry didn't have QA. We did have a release engineering team, but that team's responsibility wasn't to qualify a release, it was to build and maintain the pipelines. The teams were responsible for the quality of what flowed through those pipelines. Greenplum and Gemfire had their own historic way of doing things, but after Pivotal launched, and they were reorganized with QA folks integrated into the teams. So the Pivotal way means no separate QA, right? Well, no. Pivotal Tracker had QA folks. They worked closely with product managers. They did story acceptance, and they also did support. So they got that visibility into the full feedback cycle all the way through customer satisfaction. Okay, another example. We got write-ups in the press about how we paired all the time. So pairing is part of the Pivotal way, right? Well, no. Cloud Foundry teams paired all the time. Pivotal Labs teams paired all the time. But even after the reorganization, data teams didn't. The data teams paired sometimes, but it was a tool in the toolbox, not an all-day, everyday thing. Practices like pairing and test-driven development matter. But what matters even more is the principles and values behind those practices. In each context, we worked to get as close as we possibly could to a continuous delivery of value at a sustainable pace while adapting to the changing needs of the business. Each part of the organization did that in a slightly different way. We were guided by 3 core shared values: do what works, do the right thing, and be kind. Arguing for or against any given methodology on the basis of that methodology's perceived merits or failings completely misses the point. A methodology is a means to an end, and that end is the delivery of value, whatever that means in your context. I used to run a simulation called Word Count. In it, participants played roles like product manager, tester, or programmer. This was an in-person thing, and the product was a word counting system implemented on index cards. Some participants played the role of computer, executing the word counting instructions that the programmers wrote on paper. I usually played the role of the customer. We worked in rounds, usually 4 of them, and for round 1, I forced participants to operate in functional or dysfunctional silos. But after each round, participants had a chance to reflect and adapt. Through the day, they transformed their process, always aiming to deliver value more frequently. We kept score with play money. And after running that simulation over 150 times, with every single group having a slightly different experience, I am here to tell you that if you throw a bunch of people together without a defined process, but institute retrospectives with no barriers to collaboration and a clear definition of what good looks like, they'll navigate their way to a process that works for their context. So there is no one true way to build software. Any number of approaches can work. The 4 ingredients that are absolutely essential are, number 1, a culture that values and rewards collaboration, experimentation, and learning. Number 2, a clear definition of what good looks like or what's important for the context. Number 3, some way of giving everyone visibility into the current reality so that they can see the delta between the status quo and the ideal. And number 4, making time for teams to reflect and adapt. That is, hold retrospectives. Everything else is an implementation detail. Every practice is a tool in the toolbox that may or may not be appropriate in the current situation. The key to long-term success isn't picking the right tools or methodology, it's learning and adapting. So that's my take on the right way to build software. Thank you for listening. Until next time.